So the eyes of the world yesterday were on President Donald Trump and President Cyril Ramaphosa in that Oval Office. In that office where the President of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky, was, some say, humiliated. Now, everybody was watching to see, of course, whether there would be any change. The suggestion is that what we saw last night may have been a new chapter in U.S.-South Africa relations, with both leaders committing to ongoing dialogue on trade, tariffs and investment, and disagreeing on claims of a white genocide in South Africa. Let's listen to the South African leader after his visit to Washington, D.C.
Following that engagement, which you all witnessed, we retired to what I think they call the cabinet room. We were able then to have really good in-depth exchanges with President Trump and his other officials. The discussions revolved, of course, around golf, but they also revolved around issues of trade and investment. And we were able to, in discussing all that, want to confirm that there will continue to be engagement between South Africa and the United States officials, particularly the trade and industry level, to deal with the package of issues that we had tabled that have to do with trade and investment. And if you like, Minister Tau will be able to outline some of those that are now being given serious consideration by the United States. So I was rather pleased that there's a firm agreement and undertaking that we are going to continue engaging. So there's no disengagement. For us, that was one of the key outcomes that we had wanted. Our objective in coming here was to reset by some of the issues that had been raised during the engagement, or what many people thought was also contaminating relations, for instance, the ICJ case and Ukraine, Russia, and all that. And it turned out that, yes, President Trump's concern is about the safety of people in South Africa, much as he zeroed it down to, say, white farmers. We kept saying there is a security problem, and we're not running away from that. There's criminality, and we even sought to deal with it from its genesis, that in the end, when the economy is not growing, when there's poverty, when there's unemployment, one of the social ills that we get as a derivative is criminality that spreads itself around the country. It's not only on farms or rural areas, it's even in urban areas. So he expressed his views about that, and I was rather pleased that quite a number of our compatriots were able to deal with that, including Minister Steenhuisen and President of COSATU as well. So in the discussions over lunch, we didn't dwell on that issue, it having been dealt with more thoroughly during the engagement in the Oval Office. However, they did ask, what help do you need? And we said, well, already in South Africa, we're utilizing some technology in one of the areas in our country, which we would like to see if we can be utilized. But the main thing we said in terms of assistance and help is investments. And we harped on that we require more investments from the United States, and we require a more positive disposition from the United States, because once the United States government and the president emits a very positive disposition towards South Africa, it unlocks a lot of investment, and investors would then be willing to come and invest their money. We want foreign direct investment. We want to keep the jobs that we have that have been created by U.S. companies, and we want more and more U.S. companies to come and invest. And Minister Tau also explained that one of the U.S. companies has invested in a lithium company in our country, and that shows a positive disposition towards South Africa. We want that to increase, and one of the key confidence-building measures or mechanisms is the engagement that is going to continue on investments, on tariffs, and an investment climate creation in South Africa, and our access to the American market. And continued discussions over AGOA are now going to ensue much more determinedly going forward. So for us, during the lunch discussion, that was the big takeaway, a very, very positive indication. Of course, we couldn't discuss details because those details will be ironed out during those engagements. Secretary of Commerce was present, as Minister of Trade and Industry was also present. We also discussed the G20, and we stressed that the G20, having been formed by the United States, of course, together with other countries, it's important that the United States should continue playing a key role in the G20, more particularly because I want to hand over the presidency.
President Cyril Ramaphosa speaking last night after that engagement with President Donald Trump, and he says he invited President Donald Trump to come for the G20, and he said he's waiting for a response. President Trump did not commit last night, but we shall see. So many takes, I think, out of those conversations. In the morning, I had an engagement with one of our senior producers here, Devil, and he was making the point to me. He found it very strange that President Trump brought in South African golfers Annie Els and Retief Goosen. And I pointed out that the president is, of course, a big golf player, and he would know these guys probably from Bedminster, one of his golf courses, and of course at Malago. And perhaps that was the reason why they were there. And then I also had an engagement with our managing director here, Roberta Naika, and she was making the point that perhaps the president and his team missed a step in not inviting a representative of someone like Agri SA, or perhaps a citrus farmer from somewhere in the Cape. Imagine one of those people saying, I am a South African farmer, I am farming, and I can assure you, Mr. President, we have a crime problem, but there is no genocide. Or a representative of Agri SA saying, I represent farmers, and I'm saying to you, yes, we have a problem, but we have not seen a genocide. Powerful messaging channels and various takes on that conversation. All right, let's bring in some more voices. Azar Jammine, Director and Chief Economist, Econometrix, Ongama Mtimka, Political Analyst. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining me. Let me also share a reaction I got from my friends at Keller Securities, and my friends are, I need you to know who my friends are. They are Sven, Lesedi, and Kuda, and they say the meeting between SA and the US last night at the White House was better than expected. Azar, let me start with you. What was your take?
I think it was a successful meeting. To be honest, I felt it a very strange event in the first instance to be held. And I found it very strange to be dealing with a president of the USA who believes that there is a genocide going on in South Africa when tens of thousands are dying every day in Gaza. But still, from a South African point of view, I think it went off as well as could have been expected. And what was very encouraging is that it was, in a sense, Team South Africa. And I wish we would approach our own issues in a unified manner, far more like what we did yesterday than is normally the case back home.
Lessons learned perhaps, and perhaps we're seeing in part some of that being expressed through the Government of National Unity. Ongama, your take?
Good afternoon to you and your guest and your viewers. So yesterday was a great success. The meeting itself was a great success. Remember, we've come from strained relations, strained and not talking, to presumably still strained but talking. And that's a good thing. That's what South Africa wanted. We've lost an ambassador who got frustrated because Washington was giving him a cold shoulder. So yesterday, for me, the very idea that President Trump and President Ramaphosa were talking just before President Zelensky came here, and that there was follow through from that to have a meeting that reopens diplomatic channels between these two countries. It's amazing to me. Even the critique that's come based on the imperfections of yesterday. For me, I think it's misplaced. I think that President Ramaphosa stuck to what he came there for, and it was not the optics. It was the broader strategic objective of resetting the relations, and I think that was done to near perfection.
So you reckon when we look at this in terms of pushing ahead, a platform has been set that can enable perhaps not a total repair of relations, but enable a working relationship? Ongama.
Sorry, is that to me? Oh, sure. So what I think is important is that the ground has been set, and presumably even channels of communication among the key working groups have been set. And also the potential for South Africa's estrangement when it came to participation of the U.S. in the G20. It seems to me that it's been dealt with. I think that if we look at the contributions that were made by the business people in the room, the golfers, the leadership of COSATU and the Minister of Agriculture, I think these showed to me that South Africa wasn't going there to try and sugarcoat what's happening. It was authentic that these are some of the problems that we're dealing with, but genocide is not among them. So that was good. And I think that it does pave the way for avenues to be explored around investment promotion, trade, greater trade. But that's going to come with a lot of work because remember, behind the scenes, the groups that have been agitating for White House's stance to be a little hostile towards South Africa are going to continue. Some of these people, in my view, are badly meaning, and facts don't matter to them. What's going to be important is for that relationship to continue to be worked on so that it delivers the beans for us.
Yeah. Azar, I know you mentioned as well that you thought there were outcomes there that perhaps we could take home and exercise a little bit better. And I want to give you an opportunity to expand a little bit on that. And also, of course, your thoughts on the performance of the various sectors that we saw in that office yesterday, including the Minister of Agriculture, the golfers, and of course, the other silent partners. I was struck by the silence on the U.S. president's side. The vice president, totally silent, and we know how acerbic he can be.
Yes, certainly there are a lot that we can take away. And I think in order to attract United States investment, I think we are going to have to think a little more deeply about some of the policies that we are implementing in this economy, such as a triple BEE, and the way, not the actual policy itself, but the way it's being implemented. And I think that the United States could actually play a very useful role in helping us generate a process that can be far more constructive than that to which we have been succumbed, which has seen our unemployment rate rising to record levels, and which has seen a huge increase in intra-racial inequality as a consequence. Some of the delegates in the South African delegation appealed to the United States for some assistance. It's quite possible that we could actually help one another in sorting out some of the challenges in this regard that are common to both countries, actually.
Absolutely. I was intrigued by the golfers. Any in particular, aside from waving his passport, I mean, I couldn't make out whether he was saying he agrees with these accusations of a genocide or not. But I was impressed by Retief and even more impressed by Johan. What did you make of that, Azar?
I thought that was a great contribution and a very patriotic contribution by these gentlemen. And I think what impressed me most about yesterday was the fact that for once, South Africa seemed to go into that meeting with a strategy. And I think that strategy worked. And that is what I'm getting at. I think there are so many areas of our society and our economy where we really don't have a strategy that does work. And on this occasion, it was a unified strategy of all South Africans working together to get the best result out. And that was most encouraging.
Yeah, Ongama, feel free to add more color if you like to the golfers and their role in all of this. But I wanted to talk a little bit about some of the key things that we can extract for the things that matter for South Africa, which is one, the trade relationship, and then secondly, the participation of the U.S. in the G20.
Yeah, so about the golfers, I strongly agree around this issue of the strategy. And in fact, I think that we didn't see J.D. Vance come in precisely because South Africa diffused the situation. There would have been a plan for when they would need to come in.
Yeah.
And I think that the plan probably had to do with what happens after the ambush. And President Ramaphosa was able to diffuse that with a tone that didn't want, that avoided a screaming match. And for him to do that, he had to keep the eye on the prize. Why they went there.
Yeah.
Now, if you look at how the public gaze, as seen on Twitter or X and other platforms, is responding to that, people are saying we were begging, we were weak, the president was weak. That's not that strategy. That was weakness as a strategy to avoid a Zelensky type outcome from there. Because if you look at all the time, President Ramaphosa countered what was being said. And as soon as President Trump started to counter, to push back or rebut, then he was able to actually let him be. And if he had tried to compete with that tone, that meeting would have gone out of hand. And I think that that's when we would have seen the other players on the part of the U.S. When it comes to the participation in G20, I noticed that President Trump, right from the opening game, as it were, if you read it from a chess point of view, did show a shift from we don't want to have anything to do with this G20 to I want you to succeed. And on whether or not he was going to come, in that opening game, he said he showed a non-committal stance, but it was still better than the initial stance of, no, we're not setting our foot there. And I think President Ramaphosa was very clever on two things. One, acknowledging and reminding President Trump of the role the U.S. has played during COVID-19 in South Africa. And then secondly, the leadership of the United States of the G20. The reason why that's important, Godfrey, is that the Trump administration has attacked the very instruments of U.S. hegemony in its stance. And so having some voices that remind them of how the U.S. was instrumental in creating these multilateral institutions does the purpose of saying we do recognize the role. Because Trump is about, the U.S. is not being recognized for the role that it played and the cost that it bore, for these institutions. And to have President Ramaphosa play into that grievance was good because it then, paved the way for more warmth and for more, avenues to work together.
Yeah. Azar, I've got a tricky question for you. Why did Elon Musk not speak? Number one. Number two, where was Scott Bessent, the Treasury Secretary? And where was, who's the other gentleman? Where was Mark Rubio, the Secretary of State?
I think the fact is that they realized that they were on the back foot. Certainly with Musk, there is a looming, potentially huge issue related to his Grok AI platform, which apparently was blurting out propaganda about white genocide left, right, and center in recent days, in a manner that was unconnected, disconnected to some of the other issues that were being discussed. And this was annoying many people who were using that platform. And Musk himself suddenly discovered that it wasn't working, that Grok wasn't working. And he tried to put a message to disregard and say there was someone who messed up in the AI platform. I think this has raised a huge amount of dissension in those who are now questioning the manner in which AI generally is obstructing the truth. And I think this thing can blow up into a far bigger issue than just the South Africa-U.S. trade relations. I think it's a far bigger issue related to the acceptance or otherwise of AI and the way in which that needs to be regulated. And he may have stood a chance of being brought into a huge debate about AI rather than South Africa itself. As to why Scott Bessent wasn't there, I think it's possible that he's busy doing a lot of other things. You've got to realize that a meeting between the United States and South Africa's tiny compared with the US. It's got many other bigger fish to fry at the moment. And Bessent is probably dealing with many of these other issues. Mark Rubio, I think he himself has already distanced himself from South Africa in an embarrassing way by not attending some of the events that he ought to have been attending, and did not want to be found out and kind of. So I think they were all on the back foot, and that's why they didn't attend. Rather leave it to Trump himself to talk golf than trade in this regard. They'll have to, of course, turn up now when there are discussions with regard to the G20 and with regard to South Africa's future trade relations with the US. Absolutely. But those will be behind back doors rather than out in the open.
Absolutely. Ongama, I've got a minute and a half for you.
Yeah, so I think there are great things lying ahead. South Africa has played this one well. It's not time to take the foot off the accelerator. And I think that as us as citizens, we mustn't look at the relationship with the US from a zero-sum point of view. There's scope for a win-win relationship. And I think those that are criticizing the weakness of South Africa do not understand the power dynamics that are at play here. And we should focus on the bigger prize, which is in continued investment rather than the optics of who appears weak or strong.
Absolutely. Round one to South Africa, to Cyril the negotiator. Gentlemen, thank you for your time. Azar Jammine, Director, Chief Economist, Econometrix, and Ongama Mtimka, Political Analyst, with their take on what happened last night in the US and what it means for South Africa. My friends at Kela, this note is really beautiful. Let me give you a little bit more of some of the things that they said. The US, while in a powerful position, does need South Africa because South Africa, they say, supplies 9 of the 12 critical minerals, but importantly, is the main supplier. And then South Africa positioned itself very well in terms of talking about the need for more foreign investments and the need to weed up corruption, i.e. you acknowledge your weaknesses and then you say how you are addressing them.